place we took when we repaved Route 2 going out to Wadesville, Warren.
Yeah.
We didn't add a bike lane. Of course, it costs about $1 million to add a bike lane.
So we're live. Good morning.
Good morning. You might be second, I don't know.
Oh, well, that's fine. I eat all the time here. It is Tuesday, February 13th in Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. Most of our week is focused on finalizing our housing bill, the home bill. We have it back. It is S311. And we have an interlude. I don't know if people are excited to have a little break on Thursday from housing. But we had told some national witnesses and experts around the age appropriate coding or kids code that we would hear from them. And I don't want to try and reschedule that. So, and that is the same day as our joint assembly for certain elections. So it's 2 hours in the morning. We start at 8:30 Thursday. This Thursday. So this Thursday we'll start at 8:30. We'll do kids code for about 2 hours, and then we'll head to the floor, the House chamber. But you'll see in the agenda that there are still holes that we can fill with particular discussion. I think they're getting filled quickly. We got some really mapping data. Do you need a thing? You have it. We got some great national, well, it's local county by county data on our housing picture, how much people spend on their mortgage as a percentage of their income, things like that by county, which we can look at and see if we want to do more with the data and have Richard Ledbeater from ESRI come back if we have questions, and that could be an ongoing conversation beyond us passing the bill. Most of our time with the housing bill is ledge council, but I know we wanted to delve deeper into some of the health and safety stuff, short-term rentals, something about ag and how, Senator Stark flagged for us that there's a piece about ag that he wants us to make sure we don't have unintended consequences around.
Ag soil.
Yeah, it could be that section, and we took that out, but I'd love to hear what the issue is regardless, because I think one of our biggest decisions this week is, what our interim exemptions look like and what, if any, further guidance we want to give about tiered maps before we let the bill go. So I've asked to fill some of these holes with Charlie Baker to come back and go deeper into what he's proposing. We have that mapping piece, and Senator Cummings has requested time for a constituent.
Well, I've gotten letters that we are only talking to regional planning, and this person who has been chair of the local board.
Has he been district commission?
He's been district commission.
Okay, because we tried to reach district commissions.
Well, he is
weeks
retired,
ago. Right.
but this is
Yeah.
Ed Stead, and he is concerned that we are setting, because we're only talking to regional, that we are setting a statewide planning
Right.
and, and we haven't talked to the locals. We had 2 in last week. I'd like to know more about how the golf club turns out to be prime ag soil. Because I've heard equal complaints about, it may be up back there. Because I've heard concerns about things to get poured on golf courses that might make it,
Right, that's true.
yeah, so.
Yeah, so that's standing, we might, I don't know if Tom Little didn't want to be on record, but we might see if he'd be willing to testify and stay very general, just so we hear from 2 different,
Yeah.
a current and a retired, and people
Yeah.
who've been around the process a long time.
Tom's a good witness. He's
Yeah,
been on.
exactly.
A long time.
Yeah. So I just wanted to preview the agenda, and you can tell me and Magali witnesses or just issues you want to spend more time on. And in addition, we have mostly ledge council and the witness chair because we need to sort of fine tune some of the pieces. Oh, so Senator Clarkson, thank you. Senator Clarkson had a run-in with a deer. I don't know the
I hope it
details.
was her car.
With her car, sorry, with that details. With her
So
car.
she is slow.
She is okay personally. Her car is not. So she'll be here sometime around 10:30, 11, she thinks.
She gets another car.
Yes, but let leadership knows that she just spoke about getting her
That's
state.
good to know.
Yeah.
I was talking to her yesterday.
Yeah, and she probably won't have service for some of this journey, so we'll just wait for her to be in
There's nothing.
person. Oh, no, that's Sabina. I saw the white hair and I thought, oh, Allison made it, but okay. So, I don't know, but I think what I heard before we went live is that Kirby, you might have the biggest scheduling challenge and might need to go first.
I clarified that, so it's, I'm actually more flexible than I thought before.
Okay, John, are you okay if we start with Kirby?
It is totally
instead?
fine. Yep.
Since we can.
Yep.
Okay, so let's start with you two.
Great. Would you like me to come up as well, or?
Yeah, I think so, because I think, the language is tied to our analysis, is tied to like the allocation, so I'd love to get this sorted out.
And are we still working on 9.1?
Yes.
Oh, yes, okay.
Oh, we're not going to the bill itself?
311, S 311.
Right.
It's the same
That
thing.
is, except for one sentence, it's the same thing, but
We get copies of S 311.
and in the meantime, let's look at,
Final.
or Kirby, you might have the language
Did you change?
like up on the screen,
I-
has it changed?
Something.
Yeah, I can pull it,
Okay,
the version 9.1.
yes, yeah, we'll find it in here too, but I didn't know if.
Look, can you see me?
In my Bible, I'll see if I can. So we're looking at 9.
I think
got it.
page 30 is something. Yeah, so page 32 and 9.1. Unless it starts before. Because I will say, no, it starts on page 32. There is a request that we look at the lower end of the exempt property value from the property tax. And we would need some more analysis of that. And I don't know, Ted, if you like done any preliminary work on that.
On the
We had a conversation. Yeah,
the lower exemption piece, no, I have not, I'd have to go back to the committee.
okay.
Oh golly, sorry, will you let me in the room?
So on the table is kind of 150 or 200,000. I think Senator Cummings has thoughts on this and the housing community has thoughts on this. But if we're gonna increase, on one end, then we do want to recognize that we haven't changed this probably in 20 or more years. Do you need to?
I'm just
Yeah,
gonna do
it's
it.
Tax and check.
So you're talking about the dollar amounts in the calculation of the tax?
Yes.
If you, I think it's under 100, the first.
It says, yeah.
The first $100,000 is taxed at a lower rate, and then anything above that has the full rate. But I can't buy a house for $100,000 anymore. I mean, it's a, if
Yeah,
you
it's
wanna
very low.
have first-time home
Yeah.
buyers or people
Right.
buying lower-end housing, then that.
Right, so, 150 would be a modest recognition of the increase in overall home prices. 200, feels, I think, more accurate to the scenario people are talking about. We might want to see the fiscal analysis of both.
Yes, I can totally fund both of them.
Okay, thank you.
And would there be any, changes in the, principal residences purchased with VHFA, USDA assistance, because those thresholds are different than principal residences themselves.
Is this the 100 versus 110?
110, and then there's the clean water surcharge applies on marginal values below 200.
The clean water, that would be an interesting thing to know what it means. Do you mind?
No, I
What does
we
that
should
mean?
know.
So depending on, and I wonder, sharing the screen, right? So for non-principal residences, the entire value of that transfer gets assessed this 0.2% clean water surcharge that goes to the clean water fund.
And why, what's the theory behind
That is a
I thought that one, it was a phosphorus cleanup, it was a federal mandate that we get some money and do some real work. My thing is, I've had my house, I can go out there and pour all the phosphorus on my front lawn I want to, but it's based on phosphorus runoff from your lawns and your houses.
Okay.
We had a big finance
Okay.
debate on a clean water fund in the state. And this was when the feds were threatening, I forget the.
Right.
Everybody take
Well, the
over.
NPD,
Yes, yeah,
Right.
PMD.
Right.
Hell, yeah.
But that's, that's ongoing forever.
It's ongoing, but this was the big sort
Yeah.
of revenue push that year, and it isn't something that's like, what's the logic, it's not necessarily the question,
Finance
it's
gave
what was
them a
most political.
percentage of something
Okay,
else that has
right.
absolutely no relation to.
Yes,
So it's 2%,
point
Point.
two,
Yes.
0.2%.
and that's on any home value.
On
For-
all transfers?
Not principal residences,
Oh, okay.
and then the surcharge value is added for that marginal value above 100,000 for principal residences, and then above 200,000 for these residences purchased with different types of assistance.
But just, does the 0.2 clean water change in what we're talking
It
about?
always-
It just stays,
It's
right?
always 22%.
Okay, I was just trying to figure that
So how do people feel? I mean, I think I'm okay generally saying we should help relieve the lower end of this tax for everyone, not just for USDA, Vermont, VHCB, VHFA funded housing, which is a $10,000 difference. So do we want to keep a $10,000 difference or just push the whole thing to one?
I think we ought to find out,
Yes.
because veterans, a lot of those have very different standards, what the house has to be,
That's
you can't have they can't have anything that's gonna cost you money in the next
Mhm.
10 and 15 years.
That's true. Yeah.
It's a hard place with low
Right.
buyers and low sellers. But I'm not sure how we'd be affecting VHFA, if it would have an impact on them or their finances.
So they were the first to come to us and say, you might wanna look at this
Okay, so that,
and raise it. And then I think Gus and VHCB agree, but they have some slight nuance to how they
Okay.
feel about it. So we have Gus already coming in. Why don't we ask Maura to come in for 15 minutes? But in the meantime, let's look at just blanket 150 and 200 and see what that does.
Yeah, and if we're gonna exempt folks, I would exempt the perpetually affordable property that is because the land is owned by the housing, by the trust and the
That's
property.
kind of the differential here.
Is that? I don't know if that would be covered by this.
Obtains a purchase money mortgage funded in part with a homeland grant through.
Because they may not even need a mortgage if they're buying, it's just that land trust model.
but it's not, that's the old model where they own the land and you own the house.
Yes,
I think they've pretty much done away with that. It's very difficult to close a house, that's.
Well,
I think whatever it is, it's in the hundreds. It's a smaller amount of houses. So why don't we just look at 150, 200 and then talk to the
And
witnesses
it's-
about
Yeah,
it?
and it's primary residence, or,
Yes.
right?
oh, right, that's
Sounds-
true, it
yeah.
would be primary
It's
residence, you're right,
primary residence, and that picks up all the
yes,
affordable housing.
Right.
yes.
So to get clarity here, would you like something drafted, or are you just looking at the?
I mean, I think it would be. I don't think we need something drafted unless you would feel more comfortable. Because if it's a quick change by Friday, we're still theoretically just talking about what's the number and do we change both numbers? And we'd probably like to look at the finances and talk to the experts from the housing community. So I think I just want to flag that. We're gonna have more discussion on that. And then we move to page 33, so you're
Okay,
visioning.
so what we have in the bill now, yeah, starts on page 33, and as we've discussed before. There's a new rate, that's double the rate for transfers of residential property that will not be used as a principal residence to the transferee, and for which the transferee will not be required to provide landlord certificates. And there's some new sections here to change the allocations in the way that the committee had asked before. The request was for the new revenue generated by this rate to split that new revenue 70% to the Housing Conservation Board Fund and 30% to the Municipal Planning Fund.
And so what we're seeing is you not doing a whole new section on the increment, but just changing the proportions in
Changing
the
the
existing.
changing the proportion so that half of that revenue that was pre-existing will operate the same as it was before, but the new half of that pool of money be split 70-30. And so it meant changing some of the numbers around.
Mhm.
And I had don't check my math on that, so we think it's gonna work out as intended.
Now, it work out as you intend. I'm just saying, giving our history of never fully funding the Housing and Conservation Board. If we raise this money and put it to the Housing and Conservation Board, it might just allow us to not fund them fully, or even less fully again. And
I'm interested, what's the total amount, Mike, we're talking?
Yeah.
Percentages of meals, we had some sense of totality.
Do you have numbers on hand to?
Yeah, so from that additional 1.25%, 60% of that would be $8.1 million.
That's the additional,
That's the addition, right? That
because
is
that's 70% of the additional,
of the addition. So the additional amount is 13.5 million.
Right.
And then 60% is for VHCB would be $8.1 million.
but do you want the total, looking at this without considering it as an increment? That makes sense, like, this is drafted, so 60% is of the total. The total revenue.
So
Well, what Kirby did, I think, to be less confusing, but everything's confusing about it, it's not its fault, is instead of saying 70% of the new amount, he changed the original formula so that it's a bigger percentage of the whole amount, but not 70%, just accounts for that change of 70% of the new
Mhm.
increment.
great.
I don't know if people need a chart, do people? Is that
It would be helpful to have it written out. I mean, it's in the bill, but it would just be helpful to have a chart, 'cause I also just think generally. If it does happen, it's not gonna be new all the time, so.
Right,
So we
it-
wanna have it be easy to administer in 10 years.
Would you like me to try to pull something out?
Sure,
When Ted and I discuss this, yes.
great. And this, I will say, like, this might still be a temporary 10% bump. Because eventually we wanna know from the NRB how much they feel like they would need to operate.
Sure.
And that time would come sooner than the new maps being approved, because they're gonna be in charge of approving the new maps, so they're gonna need the capacity. They're gonna need the financial capacity to approve the new map.
Which makes me wonder if if that should be temporary. Or just leave it to a future legislature to change the allocations.
Sabina, do you have any feelings about that piece?
Well, we had this conversation, we had a meeting yesterday about this, Spina Haskell, NRB chair. The exemptions presumably in S 311 would be going into effect July 1.
We
And
have to talk about effective dates, that's something, but yeah,
Okay.
that would be my hope, yeah.
so we would have an immediate financial
Yes,
problem
Right.
for us with the exemptions. And so here's my short answer. About 30% of our permits are related to residential housing.
yes,
And about anywhere between 27 and 35% of our fees are related to housing.
okay.
That would ostensibly go away,
Mhm.
some portion of that.
Do you have a dollar figure?
Well, let's see, our fees are slated to be about 2.9 this year, so around 900 to 1 million
So the,
for 30%.
okay, so that is to keep you at a steady state, kind of acknowledging that you'll have less to do, but you still have overhead and you still have staff. And then you don't have to talk about it in this bill, but are you anticipating coming back potentially next year and saying, this is how much we need to approve these maps that are coming?
I'll answer the question this way. I don't see that we'll have less to do
Right,
because our staff will have a role in figuring out the,
with the guidance, yeah.
thank you, yes.
So really, the 1 million could, for now, acknowledge that you might have a little less to do, less revenue, but you're gonna have more to do in another realm. So $1 million would be helpful, and we could track that to a percent that grows, essentially. But it's not a huge percent.
And-
It sounds like of the overall revenue that we might wanna set aside now.
It's not part of your bill, but there's part of the Act 250 bills in the Senate and the House also are asking for a professionalized board,
Right.
which is new revenue implications that aren't covered by fees at all right now.
Do you have a cost estimate of that?
It'll depend on it will depend on the format that the bill finally takes, or the decisions, whether it's a 3-person or a 5-person board. But it could, and whether they hear appeals or not.
Right.
But we use the PUC model for compensation. So I didn't bring the piece of paper with me, but it's for a 5-person board, it's roughly 900,000.
Okay. Okay, so we could build $2 million set aside that grows, because it's a percentage, into this bill. Because I imagine they didn't put a revenue proposal forward in their bill, they just talked about an increased financial appropriation.
In
In the
the Act
professional.
250,
Yeah.
not yet.
Right,
We're not
okay.
there yet, yes.
So what I'm hearing, unless people disagree, is that we wanna add a percentage into this for the NRV that gets to roughly $2 million. And I don't know how we put like an iron box around this money. I'm sure we could talk to the appropriations committee about the importance we feel of that. But is there anything else we could do that you're aware of that would secure this funding?
A legislature can't bind future legislatures, so
Yeah,
I can't think of a way to
right.
to make sure that it's
So it's
without a doubt protected.
right. I think we could express our intent to the appropriations committee. They can continue to express their intent. We're trying to find more money for housing. So short of that, you have the chart up that we can look at, and then we could talk about adding the energy.
Yeah, so just so that the numbers make sense in the bill, so with this new rate, it's for these properties, I'm thinking of it as a pool of money for this new rate.
Mhm.
Because we're doubling the rate, that means half of it was pre-existing revenue, and then half of it is additional revenue. And we want to change how the new revenue is allocated. So the 50 there represents the how much of the original revenue goes to the VHCD.
How much is supposed to, or how much
It's
actually
50%.
does?
50%, like under current law, 50% of property transfer tax goes to that fund.
And does it actually go to that fund?
I mean, it's
Or is this
statute, it
the
does, this is
It's
what,
all
is-
notwithstanding.
right,
It's all
like,
notwithstanding. I think we've gotten close, someone said like shouting distance last year, but this might get us at least to what they're usually supposed to get, which would be nice. But yeah, we can't, that's the conversation, is we can't do more than say where we hope it
Right,
stays
so
with it.
I understand, it's just helpful for me to know
Yeah.
which ones have been.
Right.
Adhered to and which ones have. not.
Yes, we were within, I think, the 40-something million dollar range for VHCP last year, and then they got a one-time allocation. 50 million as well.
So those are 50,
So,
so those are $1 million
so, no, these are percentages.
percentages, I'm sorry.
It's supposed to be 50%, and then the next column is 25, because if we're talking about half of the pool of money, we're talking about half of 50%, so that's 25.
Yeah,
And then the next column just shows where we want this additional revenue to be out, or the way we want to proportion it, which is 70%. So to make that happen, we're talking about half of the pool of money, so half of 70% is 35. And then so to get the right percentage, we have the 25 and the 35. It's half of each of the allocations. Half of the 50% allocation is 25, half of the 70% allocation is 35. So in the bill, we have 60 because 25 plus 35 being 60.
This is like a GRE.
interesting,
level
I see what you're saying,
amount
okay,
of
because,
inflation, so.
right, so the fourth column is the new money goal.
The last column.
It's the last column.
Well, the last column's the total, but the second to last is what the new money would be, right?
Yeah, if we want to take half of the pool of money and use 50% of it for a purpose, and then
Yeah.
take the other half and use 70% of it for a purpose, the end percentage we're gonna use is 60.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
whole-
yeah, no, I understand, okay, so the third column is actually the new stuff, so the 70-30 is what we're,
That's what we're
Trying
proposing
to-
right now, and if you add that together with the existing percentage, then you get the last column.
right,
And then that
B
goes,
plus D.
and that goes for the other funds involved here, the municipal and regional planning fund.
Mhm.
Similar process used, and the end result's 23.5%. And then for the general fund, the end result's 16.5%.
Yeah.
so so the reality of the history of the first column. It's definitely below 50 and we never get to 50, or like
Yeah.
last.
I don't know when we last got to
So do we,
50%.
right, so are the percentages of the municipal and the general fund, do we get to those? I mean, is that probably general fund we do, 'cause that's probably where it ends up, right?
Oh, general fund, yes, so if it gets taken from the other increment of percentages,
Yeah.
it goes to the general
So
fund.
that's probably getting more.
It gets rated for the general fund, it's probably getting more. But I don't, if you're asking if we rated the municipal piece, I don't know the answer to that, I haven't heard that complaint. But
So
so
maybe
maybe
we
we
don't.
have a complaint.
But I do know that,
Yeah.
or I've heard that the funding to the regional commissions has been,
Right.
not increased.
So we'll
and
have,
it's
we'll
not-
have Charlie in, but let's say we could implore our colleagues to actually use this percentage right now. How do people feel about the last column, and can we hear the numbers reflected in that?
Sure. And to answer your question about the municipal and regional planning fund, I have a document for folks who do this for the budget, JFO. And historically, they've received less than their 17% as well.
Okay.
Yes, yep.
Glad to hear that.
I do want to make one point before we move on, just to be clear. So the way that the bill is structured, this numbers we're looking at only goes for this new rate, right? For those particular properties. There's 3 other possible parts of the property transfer tax, like principal residences, for instance, is one of them. These numbers don't apply to that because the intent, from my understanding, was that we were going to keep it the same as under current law for those other rates.
Mhm.
So I just want to be clear that this is,
Yeah.
the 60%
That's helpful, thank
only
you.
reflects
Yeah.
the new
50%
rate.
of the new, my new revenue.
60% of the pool of money of the new revenue. It would be technically 70% of the new revenue and leaving the other 50% alone.
And that gets us to the last column. For
Yes,
the
but it's
total,
only for this new
For the
rate for
subset.
oh,
subset.
It's not for the present one.
For the other rates under the property transfer tax, they're still 50, 17, 33.
So,
so that,
thank you for saying that.
okay,
And so when Ted talks about new revenue, he's talking about it in that way that I just described.
okay, but does it, we still are talking about the full total with our new increment percentage? Like, how much money goes to each if we pass this bill, period?
50% of the old base goes
Plus
housing and conservation.
right,
Plus 60% of the new rate, is that how we're?
Yes.
It's-
so, okay, can I? So the second residence property transfer tax revenue is separated out in the last column entirely. Like, second residence, that's the full second residence tax, all 2.5%.
Yes. That is B plus D is second residence.
I didn't do great on this part of the
2.5%,
GRE,
yes.
so, okay,
Mhm.
so,
But no matter what this has not, like, whatever rate it is, this is the percentage of the
Yeah,
money that goes to that
mhm,
box.
mhm,
So it could be any rate,
yeah,
right?
yeah, which just affects the bottom line.
why don't, yeah,
Yeah.
right, why don't you tell us for whichever figure feels most appropriate, the total amounts rate.
Well, and I'd like to see the
It
assumptions
depends
of,
on how many houses are sold in that.
right,
Well, they
right,
have an
what the
estimate
proportion
Would
is.
do for a housing crash. I
Well,
mean, the real estate market does this and it's still up here.
yeah,
You could very easily see a period in which not many houses sell.
Well, and that's
that's,
why,
we've been in that, I mean, we don't have a lot of houses selling.
We don't. But if the bottom drops out, as it has twice in my experience, you will see,
But
you
that,
won't get as much property transfer because there aren't as many houses selling.
I think Ted could probably tell us what kind of spell we're in right now with historic versus this last 3 years.
It's quieter than it was.
Right, so we're hoping it gets louder.
maybe.
Until we build some houses.
Well, right, so our goal is to, but you know, you're still taking kind of a historic average, or do you wanna tell us your formula?
Sure, and I wonder, okay, so I wonder if I can hop in and share my screen, because I have a table that puts some dollar figures, on the different breakdowns. Generally speaking, the, property transfer tax revenue is, as you all discussed, down. And we took our analysis, so from fiscal year 23, overall property transfer tax revenue was almost 70 million, 69 point something, and in fiscal year 25, it's estimated to be $58.1 million, so there is definitely a downward trend in those figures.
Yeah.
So speaking about, while waiting to share my screen, the revenue from the 2.5% assessed on second residence is the total revenue estimated to be generated from that is 27 million. We estimated the surcharge was between 13 and 14 million, so split the difference, 13.5 million. And so with the 60% and 23.5 and 16.5 allocations, VHCB will receive $16.2 million. The municipal and regional planning fund would receive $6.3 million, and the general fund would receive 4.4, just from that 2.5% second residence piece.
Okay,
Wait, I thought the general fund, we weren't putting anything extra.
That is from the remainder,
Oh,
from the base
The first part, yeah,
1.25%.
the first
Yes.
part, okay.
Mhm. So can you now tell us the total?
I can, it may be helpful to see,
The link didn't work earlier, and I'd have to be invited directly.
okay,
I just invited you.
great, thank you.
Can I ask a finance question in the meantime? So in the report, there was no consensus on revenue. So I mean, that's what I read. Can you, are we able to know what revenue sources the group contemplated or discussed?
The short answer is that we're 80% fees,
Right,
financed 80% by fees
right,
and 20% by general fund. If we're going to have exemptions, we're gonna have fewer funds, and the consensus was there's going to need to be a sustainable revenue stream, whatever that is. I mean, some people are saying more general fund, I think we should figure that out.
So there wasn't an interesting idea that didn't get taken up.
Correct, like was something like with the property tax.
Yeah, or just.
Welcome to the world of the money committees, you know, everything becomes, let's spend more money out of the general fund, or let's find revenue. That's about as far as the conversation goes.
That's what I was.
So perhaps because there's 3 members of the finance committee, I felt it was appropriate that we actually try to put a proposal in it.
No, I think that's
Which I
great.
think more policy
I'm just-
need to do.
I'm just trying to figure out that was a good group of people who have experience both paying fees and generating fees.
I think
And it just
people,
would be nice.
yes,
They
I think politically, people feel like the messenger will be shot.
Oh,
For
totally
lack of a
understand.
better term,
Totally,
if they come forward with a revenue proposal.
totally. That's why I was just asking
And-
if there were any ideas
Right.
that came up that we might
You know,
consider.
until Commissioner Bolio sat in the seat and said this was workable, you've had the tax department saying, we can't possibly separate out some of these categories. That's why the House is kind of dumbfounded that we're sorting this out in a very different way. because they've been looking at the property tax rates and they felt it would take another year. But when Commissioner Bolio said they have this fancy new tax break and they can figure out who has a second home or not, you know, that was an indication that they're ready to make this distinction.
Okay, great.
And nobody had that, I think, crystallized before.
Well, obviously, nobody can crystallize the future either. In terms of how many second homes are gonna be sold versus principal residences. It's my overall, I think I understand what's happening, but it's just awfully complex.
Right.
We sort of have a department of complexity that takes things and makes them more and more, try to explain, it's like explaining education funding
Yes.
I think this is easier.
for the public. They well, we don't use the coefficient of
Yeah. Not yet, don't you?
So that, the question on the table right now, unless I'm missing something, is do we set aside a percentage for the NRV? Do we set aside 2 million? Do we leave the woes of the NRV to the general fund, which I don't think is a good idea because we too want to see these big changes.
I think the responsible thing to do is to have a revenue source when we know there's going to be decreasing revenues, and we know that we haven't funded VHCB for a long time. So I think this is the responsible thing to do, and I think that the second home owners are taking away or just
Housing stuff.
right,
Yeah.
right. So there's a connection between the source of the revenue and the problem.
Do
So
you want NRV to have a percentage or an allotment?
I think a percentage makes sense. I do think we might wanna differentiate between the transition time and the permanent time, but we also might just wanna leave that to a future legislature, but bring it up.
I mean, they have to, as Sabina pointed out, they do have to do the guidance.
Oh, yeah.
Then they have to do the, approval of the maps. So, I think a future legislature could somehow decide they don't need some money anymore, but then they're talking about professionalizing and streamlining and making it go faster. So I think we're talking about a permanent percentage change until the foreseeable future.
Right, I wouldn't wanna put this language in as temporary because there are so many unknowns.
Right, okay. Do you have guidance on what percent? Like, in my mind, I'm thinking 2%, 4%. Like, it sounds like a low percentage, but I don't know if it should come from the base or the, Yeah.
You want to try to allocate a specific number?
well, it's not a lot of money that the NRV needs, but it's a growing amount of money. So if we started with 2 million as their need, what percentage of this revenue would that be? And would you recommend percentage of the overall or the percentage of the second residence?
If you wanted a specific number, one thing you could do, which is, it's done in context like this, is to just take the first 2 million and allocate it, and then it could be adjusted for inflation. Something like that.
I like that. But I'm open, like I think it's just the question is, do we think that's appropriate or,
It sounds reasonable and logical, and I think it would actually be helpful to have a number that would be in conversation when we're looking at this,
Mm-hmm,
so it would be obvious what we think they need.
mm-hmm.
I think that would be helpful.
Senator Brock.
Somewhat more understandable.
So Ina, does that, with the inflation adjustment, does that sound reasonable? We're now 2 million adjusted for inflation.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we'll write that in.
And that's from the 2 million, would you like it from this new rate, or would you like that from the entire pool of property transfer tax?
I feel agnostic, but I don't know if I should be.
Well, what would be simpler, simpler would be the whole pot, right?
Without trying to do additional calculations. Yeah, I think would be much more helpful.
So we would still have the additional fee as a separate charge. But then the allocation would be simpler, because that's what we're saying, right?
You want to keep everything the way it is also, as far as the allocations that are in the bill currently,
What
the
you said.
70-30 and all that.
Yeah, and I'm not hearing anybody change their mind on how that looks in the final column when we separate out all the second home ETT.
And this is to the Act 250 permit fund.
Is that what it's?
Yes, it's a special fund, is that,
Okay,
yeah, a special fee fund.
okay. Does that? I guess that fund will still exist. And it's okay if it goes there. That's what you'll be using to do this work. Okay.
What we used to do all our work.
Okay, it was special fund.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other details we've missed or questions people have?
So this language on page 33,
Yes.
are we saying that the 60% of the revenue would change? Yeah, with what we've just said,
No,
that'll
would
stay, right? Okay. Okay.
So I think we'd want to look at that language by Thursday. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, just to
Sure.
make sure we feel good about it for Friday. So, and then could we get a fiscal note by Thursday, Friday?
Sure, a fiscal note for the entire bill or just an update?
Sorry, just for this.
Okay,
piece.
yes,
Yeah, a
yes.
fiscal impact. No, just this piece.
Sure,
I'm sure eventually someone will ask for some kind of fiscal note on the bill.
yes, as it moves out of.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah, but I wouldn't want you to do that while it's in total flux between the various committees. I don't wanna commit you to that.
got it, thank you, no, that, I
You
can totally
still
do that.
want a JFO to give us some kind of housing inventory guidance at some point?
Yes, I'll connect with Pat on that,
Okay,
because I
great,
know he's
yeah,
been
yeah.
working on it, yeah.
Oh, good, okay. I just wanted to make sure that didn't get lost.
To
Okay.
advise some generally, put in the simplest term, you obviously want to see some sort of fiscal note that gives us an idea as to whether any of this makes any sense for this work.
And create more units of housing.
Will it do what it's intended to do? It's really the
Yes,
question
right.
that underlies all.
From a fiscal and data perspective, like they're looking at units of housing and costs and,
That may take you into an area that JFO typically doesn't seem to go. That's looking forward to the future.
Yes, I mean, we would look into the future. I think the challenge, if you're looking at data around how many housing units have been created, it really relies on the agencies that have been receiving these funds
exactly,
to provide that information,
Right.
and so that's a bit of the
right.
struggle, I think.
And I think, I'll say to them again, like, we're asking for their partnership, so if you feel like you're not getting their partnership, I think we wanna be able to have maps and a sense of the new units of housing. We're trying, I mean, eventually the administration wants to be able to show people, this will give us a healthier vacancy rate. This will bring more units of housing online. So we want them to be helpful to you all the time and produce their own data.
Can we have a draft fiscal note this week? That isn't,
I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for JFO, but I think they have to feel really good about it. Because we don't often, you know, a draft can be really taken as like
you just.
more than that. That's kind of a logistical question that we can answer. But do you mean a draft fiscal note of the whole bill?
Yeah, or just those charts and you have history of, it sounds like you have history of the amount of homes that are that have been paying the transfer tax, right? I mean, that would be, I'd be interested to see the history of that.
Well, they're gonna give us a pretty finalized fiscal note by Thursday on the property transfer tax.
On that, so I'm more than
Yeah.
happy to, if it would be helpful for the committee, sit down and talk for 15 minutes about general trends in property transfer tax revenue
Right.
and different allocations and how it's looked in the budget process and how this construct would look.
Yeah.
But yes, I would.
That would,
And I
require
keep saying
more background.
Thursday, but we don't have any time on Thursday
Okay.
because of the.
well, that's what here worries me, so then if it's Friday that we get.
Are you, can you do this tomorrow or is that way too much to ask?
I can, if it is, Friday would be more helpful.
Okay, okay.
Yes,
I
and I
think
would
this
spend
piece-
Thursday on it, yeah.
As long as maybe we could start with them in the morning at 9 on Friday. And you could do 15 minutes and I want Senator Cummings to be here for that since she had some questions. And we can make our final decisions and let you go finalize the bill, your piece of the bill, and then as long as you feel comfortable that you could play with those numbers and have it ready for us to vote on by 11 o'clock. The alternative is we have the 8 to 9 planning meeting with Wedge Council where we could make sure it captures the latest intent we've had from this discussion and let Kirby go work on that and just have Ted do the fiscal note piece
I'm currently free Friday morning until 10:30.
until 10:30.
And then,
Okay.
and I could do something, like if there needs to be some drafting in the afternoon on Friday, that would be possible, but I don't know how the.
I think we should try to be. So if we could start with you right at 9, look at the language that we've intended. Make final decisions about if this is the language we intend, that gives Ted what he needs to do to present more of a concrete fiscal analysis. And it frees up Kirby if there's any last minute changes before 10:30. We're good on that? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
And in the meantime, if you do get that 150, 200K, if you could just email the committee that, so we could talk about it informally and try to have a decision ready for you on Friday.
Sure. Yeah.
Because we'll be talking to the advocates about it, but it would be good to do that with the financials in mind of, 150 to 200K, somewhere in between. Does that make sense? Okay. Whenever you are able to do that.
Of course.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you. John,
Hello.
what is your timing?
Can do what you guys need, I think,
Okay,
fairly
And-
flexible right now.
cool. Are you using S311 because I have reordered your section?
Yep, I can,
Okay. Okay, so, I know I want to make sure we have time for the senior housing, age-appropriate housing piece, because there's some questions there. But otherwise, I think we probably just want to walk through all your sections and see where we are.
sounds good.
Okay.
Look, Ollie, would you mind letting me in?
Sorry.
I hope,
Yes, I'll send you a new.
oh, I need a new one, okay.
think your section starts at page 36.
It's right, very bottom of page 36. Thank you.
Fine, this might be.
The Kirby's, yeah, I can run it up to him if you. Yeah. Is this big enough for you guys to see?
Kind of have my prescription sunglasses with them,
Okay.
because I think that we have the document.
Okay, John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel. Thanks for bearing with me as we pull up the tech. Yeah, happy to just walk through all my sections since we've kind of had to rapidly speed through a lot of them. First piece is modifications to the PHIP program. I don't think this was especially controversial, but this was to remove grants.
What section are you trying to?
This is section 32, starting at the bottom of page 36. We did retain the competitive language as requested. The other piece here, is sort of administrative tweaks that we've talked about before to allow appropriations to be used for administration of the program. And funds to go to state agencies, political subdivisions, public and private organizations. That is a change. I mean, that does allow, that authorizes a bit more flexible usage. So this could go outside of the department. If they're subgranting to other agencies. We do have the bump up to 70,000 per unit. As requested, we included some constraining language to ensure that when determining whether or not to hit that cap, any rehabilitation or creation is for commercial conversion purposes. That's added. Just to ensure that that piece is accounted for, and we may await. I think that Alex Farrell had said that they might have proposed language for that. This is sort of placeholder for that. It may be sufficient. It matches the style of what's already included,
Yeah.
but could consider more prescriptive guidelines if desired. And I think that primarily, Senator Clarkson had been the one concerned about that. Unfortunately, isn't here yet.
Yes, and I just wanna say, I've told, there's sections where agencies wanted some language like the exemptions in the municipal section, and until they give us language, we're using this. We'd be voting this out unless they give us language this week, so people can hurry others along or help them with the wording, but we don't have control of that. Senator Harrison.
Think, just on this language, and whether any rehabilitation or creation is for commercial conversion purposes, that to me sounds like a judgment call and not a requirement.
So
Like it would score higher if it was.
right, it is not perfectly prescriptive, if that is what you mean. It does
Yes.
align with the way the rest of this section is set up. So currently, it's the 50K cap. And in determining whether or not to hit that cap, the sentence just has that they are to consider the number of bedrooms. It doesn't say that the number of bedrooms is determinative of hitting that cap. But that's how the program currently works under the
Right.
authorizing language. This matches that level of discretion, I guess that you could say. But you could, spell out something more definitive and say, if it is X, then you
Or-
receive.
I will say, I mean, I think we'd be trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. I mean, they come in and told us that their average grant is $38,000. They're being quite frugal and incisive with the program. I think this gives them what they need to continue to do that. We have very little time to sort of keep us.
Okay, well, this isn't limited to commercial conversions.
No.
What we could just say is $70,000 per unit per commercial conversion unit or something like that.
That, so we leave the 50,000,
But no, it can go up to 70.
but then you'd be taking out the other units that aren't commercial conversion. That's the only sentence that talks about the
Right.
allocation.
Right, and I thought our intent was to restrict the 70,000 amount to units that were commercial conversions.
So, but all I'm saying is then you'd need two separate sections,
Exactly.
one that has a $50,000 cap and one that has a $70,000 cap. Because we
Oh.
had two separate amounts before, we've said not exceed.
That's right. Yep. So if you wanted to spell it out that way, it would become wordier and you have two
Alright.
pieces.
Well, I mean, that's our intent, and,
Yeah.
70 is a significant increase.
Right.
And it's it's double basically what the average amount is.
Mhm.
So I think 70 should be, restricted to commercial. This might be. This is Alice.
Purposes.
How are you
Yeah.
doing?
Better than the deer.
Oh, gosh.
Glad you're fine though.
Thank you. Sorry for being.
No,
No, you're allowed to keep
Okay,
those.
we understand.
Oliver.
Did he drive you?
He just dropped everything. Yeah, he's still on the Zoom call outside. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Take your time.
yeah, I just need to get some water. I'll be right back.
So
So,
let's come back to this one after Senator Clark's.
okay,
I'm looking
What-
forward.
what I'm hearing you propose, and I'm just saying it's a separation of the two sections. Is that it shall not exceed $50,000, et cetera, et cetera. And a separate section that says they may go up to $70,000 for commercial conversion.
Yes, and I thought that was our intent.
That was
I
our
mean-
intent.
You can put it as a different sentence.
Right. That's all I'm saying, is you wanna
Yeah.
separate the two sentences.
I think you guys are actually
Thank
agreeing.
you.
Yes,
Yeah,
Thank you.
right. Can you
Yes, that's true.
make that change? Okay. And that, you want,
yes,
okay.
yes.
Is the definition of commercial conversion purposes sufficiently clear that
There-
everyone understand it?
So there is no specific definition of what commercial conversion purposes is. This was just drawn from the request that I guess Commissioner Farrell had. So it'd be similar to this point about whether you would want to spell out the 70K cap. If you would like it to be prescribed to be explicit, that's something that we would want to ask them. What exactly do you mean by commercial conversion purposes? And we could see if there's something in existing statute that matches that we could just pull out and use a pre-existing definition. Or if we felt that it was, or you guys felt that it's sufficiently clear to the
Sounds
implementation.
sufficient.
Well,
clear to me.
we do have another section that exempts 24 units if it's in a commercial conversion. So we might, I mean,
Is
this
that,
program has worked very well with very little money to make these units, so I don't wanna hamper this program. Commercial conversion, we do talk about it in another section, so if there's a needed definition, I think we need to rely on Ledge Council for that. I just can't count on anybody else by
sure,
Friday.
I mean, I think we ought to have a definition.
Sure, but I'm just saying that,
To me, it's unclear.
Is-
I've been listening all
is
the
that
time.
something you wanna work on with John? Or is that something you think Ellen would work on?
I can look to see, if this is noted elsewhere, I can look to see the context in which it's noted, and
Okay.
see if there's a way to pull it in.
Okay,
So that's easy enough to do.
okay,
And in the meantime, just say converting commercial space to residential space or something like that.
Right, there's a way to spell out the concept.
Right.
Down and just
Yeah.
simply define it.
Right,
sure.
well, making a definition seems to be a really big deal.
Well, it's just that if you end up using terms that are previously undefined and then you define them throughout, you've now redefined the terms that are used elsewhere.
Right,
So it's not as simple as
Yes,
just checking
it's
if it
not.
works within one sentence. It
right.
can have systematic effects. That's the reason.
And
Yeah,
I'm
well,
just,
the last
yeah,
thing that you want though, is you want something that could be interpreted differently depending upon where it exists in the statute, which is why I think you need a definition.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I just want us to return to, we are looking at Ledge Council's capacity by Friday.
Mhm.
We are not counting on outside stakeholders
Mhm.
to get us anything else by Friday. So it is a matter of making sure that Ledge Council has the capacity. So they may come back to us and say, this would be a big lift,
This-
and
this
we
sh-
may have to look
Yeah.
again down the road.
I would say, without knowing more, this seems totally doable. If I get into this and it turns out that it's
So
problematic,
rookie statement, huh?
yeah, well, I don't rewatch my
Yeah,
testimony to find out things that I've said before, so.
But yes, I agree, it would be nice, but I'm just trying to hamper
Yeah.
our
And
expectations.
we actually should have a definition for that. I know it might be hard to do it in a week, but it seems like we should have a definition. Okay.
We talked about this program tweaks, just to apply terms that previously applied to grants to 5-year forgivable loans. We did add this language just to ensure that those requirements, including coordinated entry organizations that ensure the correct tenants are being provided or are eligible for this, are applicable to 5-year forgivable loans. Previously, that language only applied to grants. Jumping down to section 33, this is on page 39. Appropriations, 5 million to DHCD for VHIP. And then $1 million for the Healthy Homes Initiative. If we continue on to section 35, this is the Middle Income Home Ownership Development Program. This language was meant to provide, here you see at the top of page 40. This new language is meant to provide flexibility to go above the 35% cap in certain instances where, and this is a little bit more prescriptive than what was requested, but trying to cabin what can be done here. Unless the agency later determines the project will not result in affordable owner-occupied housing for income-eligible homebuyers without additional subsidy, in which case the agency may reasonably exceed this limitation and only to the extent required to achieve affordable owner-occupied housing. So this is, if we're just in the area of talking about whether language could be tightened or loosened, this is something that you could think about, this last clause, in which case the agency may reasonably exceed this limitation and only to the extent required to achieve affordable owner-occupied housing. The intent of this is to say that only in certain cases can this be exceeded. That's if you've made this, if the agency has made the determination that housing will not be affordable for income-eligible homebuyers and can only be reasonably exceeded. So.
And I just want to make explicit, this is remote housing finance agents.
That's what,
right.
thank you. That's
The initial language that the VHFA had proposed was a little bit more generic, just to say that they had revision and bolster up. So this is a bit firmer than that, says an affirmative determination has to be made. If you guys have any questions on this.
I would just want them to report back on things like this because this is a big deal.
Yeah, I
A lot of
mean, more or less
discretion.
reporting back to us, so.
Right, except that we're not getting the report that we got last year, which at some point I want to talk about. But
I think, I know you keep bringing that up, but I don't know
I know.
which report you.
I know, I'll show you.
Okay,
Sorry.
I don't wanna like deny you this
No.
report, I just don't know.
Yeah,
I kept thinking it was the housing survey that JFO did,
no,
data from the
no, it's the stuff that we got at the end of last year, but
Okay.
I'll show you.
So is there a request to add a reporting piece in the event that they go above this 35% threshold cap?
It needs to be documented somewhere.
I know it's documented. You know, what I mean, I think that's why they came to us, because they have one project that has met all of this. And they had a hard time with the calculation. So I think if we informally said to Maura, we want to know. But I also just remember, we didn't allocate any new money for this program. So we're talking about for now, using up the money that they have, which is gonna be just a couple projects.
So I can hold off on that for now unless you guys.
I would hold off on it and in the meantime,
You talk to Maura and
right.
At the bottom of page 40. This is language added to apply another permissible condition for affordability subsidies. Previously, this was restricted to remain with the home to offset the cost of future home buyers, or that subsidy is subject to a housing subsidy covenant. This adds the ability for VHFA to recapture the subsidy upon sale of the home for use in a similar program to support affordable home ownership development. I haven't heard any adverse comments on that in previous walkthroughs.
it gives them flexibility to work with the original
Right.
subsidized homeowner on, you know, how they get their equity and. they
And what
need-
happens to that funding now? Like this allows them to recapture it.
So currently, it's subject to just the two conditions. If they use this affordability subsidy, it has to remain with the home.
Right, so
Sorry.
essentially what VHFA has, or I think VHFA has done in that context is they've tied themselves to a specific piece of property. They may all determine, you know what? Like, we don't want, this isn't it, you know, this isn't the house we want to stay attached to. We can sell the house and take our equity and create another shared equity homeownership house.
Okay, which is similar to what the housing trust do, or could do.
Well, they do it with VHFA. So this is, yeah, this allows the whole shared equity homeownership program to have the flexibility to not stay with the house.
But do you not stay with the house?
To sell the house and take that money
Yep.
and buy a different house.
In case it doesn't work out.
In
some
case for
reason.
whatever reason, this house is like far from
Sounds
you
good.
know, schools or like it just, they've decided this house, maybe it is more valuable on the open market. And
Or
they can get two
maybe-
houses with the money.
Or maybe it's not big enough or whatever.
Right, it's exactly, yeah, it's flexibility that they're asking.
But this isn't all of the shared equity houses, I don't think. I think it's just this,
This is just under this program.
This is if VHFA gives money towards this affordable owner occupied housing.
At the top of page 42, you'll see language stripping out the best efforts to ensure geographic communities and regions. Equitable access to all eligible geographical areas. Based on, I think you guys heard from Mara, that this was just duplicative of the sections above. So nothing's unnecessary. Don't have to strip this out if you don't want to, but essentially the purposes are already accomplished. Section 36 just repeals similarly duplicative provision. There were two implementation provisions for this program. Section 37 is.
And just to note, this section had $5 million. And we decided as a committee that we are not proposing a new allocation to the middle income homeownership program.
They
Right.
just, they're pretty much all committed, as I recall.
It's pretty much committed. The House sponsors wanted $5 million more dollars for
I
this.
know.
Mora, of course, would not argue with that, but it's not in the governor's budget and it's not necessarily being listed at this time.
So we'll see what happens as it moves.
Yeah.
And if there's more put in by the House, we can consider it.
Right, and it is our one.
It's a baby of
Yes.
our, yeah,
We like it because it creates homeownership that's extremely expensive.
it's super expensive for what it gets.
As we get to section 37, the conversation that is kind of straightforward from what we've been talking about with legal aid, et cetera, but the conversation I would put on the table is to try and take this whole bucket of promoting, you know, reducing evictions and promoting stable rental housing. I want to put that whole bucket at $5 million.
The total for
The
all.
total.
Okay,
And that
I
would
mean, the
be
landlord.
the landlord
program.
okay.
And we can get rid of the landlord relief program, we could wait till the eviction study and see. But if we put them both at 2.5 million, that's one option. The other additional option is to add back in the 1.4 million that was requested in budget adjustment. For two additional programs. There was $1 million, I can find my notes.
Right, no, I remember.
So, and then there was 400,000 to stand up some kind of mediation program. I'd like to present something to appropriations that lives in a $5 million bucket in this section. So it could be that we do 2.5 million for rent arrears assistance, which is what legal aid requested. The $1 million for something else that I have to find in my notes, the 400,000 for the mediation, eviction diversion / mediation program, and then the remainder, which is about $1 million to the landlord relief program.
Okay.
So I'm putting that on the table.
sounds reasonable.
Okay.
So this would go to 2.5, each
Right.
2.5.
Well, the landlord relief would go down to something like 900,000 or $1 million. because we take.
Well,
the
let's
low-
put it in at 1 million now, just round.
Okay,
And the rent arrears assistance program, which I think at its best is really helpful. Is that the curing? Is that,
the rent arrears assistance fund is the money directly, if they're in a mediation or what have you. They can help pay a flexible amount of arrears. I mean, could be quite a bit of money.
but this isn't the curing program. where we
No,
cure
that's
the
400K. Let me
Okay.
find this so that I don't,
Okay, so what are you proposing instead of 5 if we're doing 1 million?
2.5 to the rent
2.5.
arrears investment. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find.
Okay, don't worry, we'll get it.
Yeah, and there was $1 million for something else, and I'm forgetting exactly what it was, but it was like a new.
It'll rock.
And 400,000.
And what 400,000 was the mediation, to stand up the mediation staffing in CBOEO or something. But anyway, it was the BAA proposal, which is floating around somewhere. John, do you think that's something you can find?
Yeah.
Okay. It's the House BAA proposal.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's jump down.
So before we do that, I did want to, while we're in appropriations, I did want to add $1 million for first generation homeownership.
Right, which we have created in this committee.
It has been funded at $1 million a year.
Yeah, but we haven't, put. it in
There's no
yet.
money this year.
Right.
So Maura would appreciate that. I would, it's my pet rock in this in the
No, I
financing
know.
commission.
That's a program you guys created in the last
Yes.
year.
2 years.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
we have.
I think we created it. in
yes,
20.
yeah, it's the first generation program because they feel pretty solid on the first time home buyer.
It's the down payment assistance program is what it's
Mhm.
called. And it's the VHFA's down payment assistance program, and this is specifically to encourage first generation home buyers to.
Mhm. And there's a full
And so-
definition of what first generation means, and Maura will be in for 15 minutes this week, but I know she'd be happy to help you.
And that's currently unfunded, so.
It has no appropriation
Okay.
this year. They are still spending money with that. They've been appropriated, but they want to pick that up, and I want this program to.
Because we're getting more applications now that we modified the
Mhm.
definition.
Yes. And they take a little longer because she's
And-
working with the banks to.
And the word of mouth, I mean, it just
Yeah.
takes time for the
All
word
right,
of mouth,
exactly.
because that's the kind of thing that will really spread word of mouth.
Right, I told Rusty she's better.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
I mean, and Russ Ingles said it was good. He had several people
Yeah,
use it
Yeah, because he's a
in the
realtor.
kingdom.
right,
Yeah.
right.
I sent you something as an institutions queen about the fishery.
Oh, yes.
Salisbury.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. I'm
Salisbury
getting- I'm
fishery.
getting a lot of-
I know.
No decision has been made.
Okay. We might need like a.
We can't let that baby
but
die.
That's a.
Oh, no, we do need a response.
Yes, okay. So that's the only other appropriation that I wanted to make sure makes it in there. Does anybody else have any other appropriation thoughts or questions or concerns?
Not at the moment, because my head hasn't gotten the money yet.
That's okay.
We're working, I do have to call my insurance
Yes,
agent,
yeah.
who doesn't
No, that's fine.
keep calling me back, so
So
money
we
is on my
have,
mind.
we have flexibility until Friday, except for Thursday. Thursday's quite tight and not about housing, but.
Jump down to landlord certificate, this is section 39 on page 43. The subsection F, additional language is to ensure confidentiality provisions apply to the pre-existing request of the public for sharing that database. This is something that we haven't talked too much about, but I know that there was some concern around subsection I, which was pulled from the other rental registry proposal, as I understand it, was previously negotiated to try to ensure confidentiality.
Okay, could we, before we get to page 43, let's come up with a new name for rental registry.
Sure.
I think let's call it rental data.
Yeah, because we're not doing a rental.
Where are we
Right.
saying, no,
At the
It's just,
bottom,
it's the reader assistance heading,
at the bottom of 42.
oh, yeah, no, it's no longer.
I would like to
Yeah.
call it rental data. You know, it's
Yeah.
rental
Rental
data,
data collection or something.
yes,
Okay.
rental data collection.
Okay.
And,
Cool. So I think here there is a potential brand bargain that we're looking at.
Yeah.
And I wanna make sure it feels like a real, negotiation to everybody, so I'm gonna put something big on the table. I think VHFA would very much benefit from aggregated rental pricing data.
Yes.
And if we ask for that and give up all public access to this registry, that to me feels like a reasonable big bargain. That's what I'm putting on the table.
And what's the purpose of the aggregated data as far as rental?
Because I think we'd really benefit from knowing county by county and town by town, how much it costs to rent. We kind of pick that data from where we can get it and rely on.
What do we do with it? We're supposed to just define the value.
It helps us with our policy work, and it helps, the planners are the other key partners here in wanting rental data, not
Right.
necessarily the amount that it's
Right.
rented at, but the amount it's rented at is helpful policy
Right.
work for us as we look at everything from
I,
minimum wage to, you know, wages in different counties and different regions of the state.
I also see it as
To
really
basic
important.
needs budget, sorry.
Right,
It's
yes.
very important for
Yeah.
basic needs budget, which we're gonna be talking about after we finish this housing bill.
So I've staked my credibility on trying to help people see that if you create rental vacancy, you do not have the same year over year increases in rental housing prices. That healthy vacancy rates should lead to a slowing of increases in rental housing costs. Property taxes probably also figure into that, so I think it's just really relevant for us to be able to see year over year. We had a big property tax change, here's how it impacted. We have healthy vacancy in this county, we're not seeing the same growth of rental costs, so. Again, what we'd be getting for that is making this confidential, once again, which I think satisfies Anne especially that it's a little iffy.
And it satisfies the commissioner. I mean, the commissioner
Right,
is.
but Anne is happy when the commissioner's happy because the commissioner's biggest responsibility is keeping the trust of the public on how they provide.
Well, I think it also may address some of the issues that they have been concerned about rental registry.
Right, yes.
Yeah, no, and this is for me a big deal, because as you know, as much as you hate it, I love it. So and again, we were in Barry, Senate Gov Ops was in Barry, and again, the registry came up as a discussion item and something they use and is an important tool useful for them. So are you proposing, Chair, that we on line 17 on page 43? Add location and cost and price of rental unit?
I'm on page 44. Oh, so we're using the S bill because we're using the actual introduced S311.
I'm strange here.
I have 9.1, isn't that the
Right.
same as 9.1?
It is, but the sections were moved around a little bit.
Okay,
And now I
Alright.
think we want to, the public is most likely seeing the actual bill that was introduced.
okay, public, this is my concession to you, one of my many concessions to the
On
public.
behalf of the public, thank you. Yeah,
Okay, so what page are we on?
page 44,
Okay,
where the list of things that were added. Okay.
I would say I would say location and,
Maybe number of
Rent-
units and then
well, it has number of units.
go
up
right
here.
after that.
Where is, I saw number of units, type of rental unit.
Yeah.
Number of units, and then I would add 6 instead of the school property,
Mhm.
I'd drop that to 7 and I'd add 6 and say. Price of rental unit or
What I think
rental,
growth.
Just
Gross,
say monthly rent.
gross monthly rent.
Sure, so as
As
opposed
opposed
to
to
net, when would
I don't
be-
know, but I think, I mean, it's a tax form, so I
Or
wanna make sure.
actually, what you want is what the person pays, right?
yeah, because if they're
Maybe.
paying heat and electricity, that's separate. I mean, it's sometimes it's included and
Right.
this,
If it's included, then it's gross.
so gross
I would say
monthly rent.
gross monthly rent, and we're not, I think if it's aggregated, we don't really care per unit.
Let's ask Laura what she wants,
Well, right, and let's ask, Bolia what will
yeah,
be,
Whether,
Well, we need per unit.
well, do we,
Yeah.
is the question,
Yeah,
because we're getting
yeah.
her address and it's aggregated anyway.
and you know that there are X number of units at each address, so that there are 4 units and it's $2,000 for the
Right.
whole unit, you know it's $500 a unit, I think.
I don't think you know that. I think you're if we heard from some landlord association or somebody, I can, let's say you have a building with 20 units, they have different prices.
Yeah, if it's a
Your
one bedroom.
bookkeeper is gonna have an easier time telling you, this building grosses you this much.
But how is that
And
helpful?
right now it's by address, because it's aggregated anyway.
No, but my question is.
Yeah.
If we're looking at the cost of a 2 bedroom rental for people, so that we know what a family needs. In a county, to go to the basic needs budget,
I don't,
how do I know from aggregated data what the cost of a 2 bedroom rental?
we're not gonna get that from this data, because I think
Then
that would
why
be-
is it useful?
because you're getting an address's monthly rent and you're getting the number of units. So you're getting the aggregate and
I get that. But how, if you can't.
how would you write that on a one-page landlord certificate?
I don't know, but that's why I wanna ask Maura.
We
Because
can ask Maura, but I'm proposing gross monthly rent because we are balancing the tax department doing work that is not tax related
per unit or
per address.
per address?
But we'll have the number of units,
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
so we can divide by the number of units.
But I just did
We're
that
not
and
getting
she
access.
said I was wrong.
Well, I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying we're not gonna say to them, give us all your prices of your 1 bedrooms, your prices of your 2 bedrooms. We're gonna do some rough math. That's what we're gonna do.
Very rough.
Yeah.
That
The
is.
whole issue of gross rent, it is very different to an all-inclusive unit that includes heat and hot water and all the rest is, those that don't.
Well, and we're getting a snapshot
And I
that
know
tells
that
us
the
year over
information
year.
isn't reasonably available, in many cases without more onerous stuff. The other, I look here, for type of revenue, I have no idea what that means. Big,
It already exists, so
Large,
I think
dirty.
mobile home,
I don't know what it means.
apartment,
Well,
I don't
think
know.
there ought to be some clarity.
Yeah.
That's already exists.
I
So,
know what it
That's
means.
a good question. I think some clarity to that is a good.
well, let's get Bolio for another 15 minutes this week anyway. I think we're running out of our little flexible spaces, but we want Bolio to come back in and we need to confirm that this is all gonna work.
And let's,
By the Department of
And I'm just
Obscurity.
texting Maura and asking her
Okay.
about this.
And more is gonna come in for.
and I think when we talk about aggregate, I think we need to be really clear about what we want, like, do we want it by municipality? By,
More gets the
county.
addresses.
right, okay, so Maura would get it, so then she could do it by municipality.
Right now, if you look at what's publicly available, it includes the address of the town. So we're trying to balance not asking tax department to do something that's not tax related. And this is the data that they could collect on one form.
So town is the most precise that it would be.
Yes,
Exactly what you mean by location.
they have the zip code.
So zip code is even more.
Oh, yeah, so they have the address.
So they
have
can
the
do
address, they have
that.
the street. Right now, you can.
No, I know they do, but we wouldn't, or,
What's publicly available right now includes the address.
What does location of rental unit mean?
Address.
So I think address, yeah.
We could just say
That's
address.
what I mean by.
Right.
the Language here, I don't know what that means. I can
Well,
interpret
let's-
it many different ways.
You can ask
If we want the
Commissioner
address
Bolio.
or
Right.
zip or whatever, that's what we should be.
I think type of unit probably, I'm assuming, is 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3
I don't-
bedroom.
I doubt that, but this is a Bolio question. This is not a-
well, we have the landlord certificate, we had it,
Right,
I had it,
yeah. So while you're looking at that,
Location, do you want the address? Is that what you're asking? for?
Yeah,
Do you want
I just
the
changed it.
address or do you want the town?
I think it gets us both, because the town is part of the address. I think like you have
Well,
mobile
if you
home
want
parks
the
that
mailing
are,
address or the physical address?
that is why it says location. Because you have mobile homes potentially that are like on a county line, and the mailbox is over here, but this gets you the location, not the mailing address. So I don't know that we need to go into existing statute and change it. I don't know that, for sure. So we can talk to Bolio, but we can ask them all these questions.
And
So just so I understand, back on 43, I understood this compromise to be that there's some retraction of publicly available in exchange for adding this rent piece. Are we modifying
fine.
subsection F to, because currently as set up, not even in this statute, but currently members of the public can make a request to this database. I don't know what was negotiated during that process. I understand generally that people want things to remain confidential, but would this be removing that piece or is it just striking?
I think we have qualified who can add access to it. And we discussed that here and Craig seemed reasonably okay with it. We obviously can refine it. But it was, the Vermont Emergency Management Department, the Department of Public Safety, i.e. The Department of Public Safety, and you could name Vermont Emergency Management, and then Vermont Housing and Finance Agency. Those two.
Yes, and so we're taking out any other appropriate state department and agency, and Maura suggested we say, and the entity or agency doing the housing needs assessment. Because she might not always.
And DHCD, yes.
Yeah, I just would wonder, and again, this would be a question of tax department, but once you start adding things like gross monthly rent, you're getting into income information.
And then it's confidential.
It's
Confidential, as, in other words, what you're saying is the information can be aggregated, but it can't be
Yes.
released to anybody on the list, including emergency management.
That's
No.
right. I mean, emergency
If that's what
management,
we're, if that's what we're saying.
well, the tax, it says any data, and it would be completely up to the tax commissioner to decide that Vermont Emergency Management doesn't need the rental, they don't need half of
I
it,
think we
they don't need the spam number.
we could clarify that.
Yeah,
And I think it would be helpful to have VEM's needs. VEM's needs, Craig's needs and Maura's needs taken into account here.
right.
And I think we.
But did you catch the language change, John, on line 1718?
So this is to strike any other appropriate state department or agency.
Yes.
Well, we also want.
And to add the HFA.
To add, no,
No.
to add the agency conducting the housing needs assessment. That was more a suggestion,
Okay.
I would,
because
okay,
that
That's
is
required,
usually DHCD and VHFA, but it could change.
so I would then name DHCD because it should be named, that's not gonna change, who's doing that. With whichever organization is doing the housing assessment.
So they currently contract with VHFA to
Yes,
do it, right?
correct.
So the idea is. to
And
include
any other
VHFA.
contractual body doing the housing.
Something like that, but I don't think we wanna make anything broad, nothing like they could give it to whoever else.
And should this be to DHCD exclusively for the purposes of the statewide
Yes.
housing needs? Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
That's great.
So they don't go rogue.
So I can see in another Irene, for example, a
Mhm.
town in need that doesn't have a rental registry, contacting VEM and
Mhm.
asking for this kind of data, which would be an additional partnership.
So they're in there.
I'm just trying to think,
Yeah.
how, my purpose
Yeah.
is for towns that don't have rental registries,
Mhm.
how this could be used.
And
It would be up to Vermont Emergency Management to
Yeah.
communicate directly with any landlords that they think, they can get input from their municipality, but I understand the concern that we can't just name a municipality
No, I get that.
or any entity, like Vermont Emergency Management should be able to do what they need to do and communicate if an emergency.
so we're on section H.
We
Um,
will need to go back to the
Yeah.
confidentiality piece, but yes.
Yeah, you have to, because, once you start putting rent and so on and so forth, and I got a feeling the tax department is such a constraint.
That's my grand bargain, is it all becomes confidential and yes, the rent.
It's I'd love some partnership in that, cause
Well,
I think,
I didn't wanna speak for you, but I think that's what we're getting
Right,
for making it all confidential.
But when we say all confidential, there's always an exception, and that's
Well,
what I wanna be clear on,
and
what's the
that's-
exception?
Well, let's first go to F and say, this is now all confidential.
So F, okay, so F is the.
Yes,
Okay.
if everyone's agreeing that this is the bargain we're making, the whole registry becomes confidential. And then we go to H and say, except Vermont Emergency Management and
So-
those conducting the housing needs assessment.
F on page 43,
Yes.
which. Yes,
Currently, this is to make available to a member of public upon request.
right, so it's no longer available, this will be confidential except with the exceptions we've identified. And I think between the three parties, we can identify which of these data in pieces we can released to VEM. You would,
Mhm.
you don't probably need, you need the address, you
Right.
need the, how to contact them too.
Right. I have faith that
I have two,
whoever the tax commissioner is, that they were chosen because they understand that they err on the side of confidentiality. And that they would probably err on the side of giving less information, but what was helpful in an emergency.
So section F will now just task the department with preparing that database in the form of a sortable spreadsheet, but will not make that available, and then
Yeah.
we'll jump down to I think I, or H and I both address
H and
this.
I.
H and I will address the parties to which the information may be made available.
Mm-hmm.
And did you want to call, it's kind of like potentially going down the line of calling out particular data that would be?
I don't think we
Communicate-
need to do that, because I actually think that might be more than they need at the time, like, I think we just leave it to the tax commissioner.
Well, you leave it to the tax commissioner, in this case, what you're saying, is what are the exceptions to this all confidential rule?
Right.
And so then you get into the issue of emergencies. And it may well be that there's certain items on that list from that spreadsheet that you would release,
Mhm.
certain
Three and
items
four.
that you would not.
Mm-hmm.
right, and I
And
think
again, I think just so long as it's explicit,
So you do want to spell it out, because I think we can trust the tax commissioner.
you
I
can
would
do
spell
it
that.
explicitly, or you can say, you
Purposes
can allow the tax commissioner to have a veto power over certain fields.
Yeah.
Whichever way.
Well, why don't we ask Folio then what makes more sense?
yeah, and I would, we can ask Eric too
Right.
at VEM, but I would assume that 2, 3, and 4 would be essential for them
Mm-hmm.
to be able to relocate people in the town if they don't have it.
And so currently on line 15.
Yeah.
The department is to provide any data compiled from the certificate, so you would want to modify this if you're trying to get at this particular issue. So you could say, you could set it up either way, you could say
Right.
it
Well,
in the
the-
discretion of the department.
VHFA is gonna want a lot more of that data than just 2, 3, and 4. So
So-
let's
So
talk
it can also
about
be
that.
split, it could also be split that, 2 VEM, 2, 3, 4,
Right,
and then 2.
so we have flagged it.
Okay.
I don't think we're gonna solve it without the stakeholders.
Okay.
Have we asked all the so we've asked Folio, that's Laura,
Eric at VEM,
oh yeah,
Laura, and Craig, those are the 3 stakeholders,
right.
and DHCD via Laura.
I have a suggestion on the title, just call it rental data collection and protection. Just so that we'll know that we're protecting the data.
Again, whether or not on top of
Confidentiality,
25I, whether it should be more restrictive than even indicated.
Mm-hmm.
Now that it is confidential, just for clarity regarding confidentiality
Right.
may be used by the designated recipients,
Yeah,
whatever specific purposes, but not beyond that, and not to
Exactly.
be disseminated.
right. We can basically ask Commissioner Folio, if you got hit by a bus, like, what would you want this to say, What do you think of the tax commissioner want to protect public trust?
But what a bad tax commissioners.
And I think we want more than trends.
I don't talk to them like it though.
Yeah, I think we want more than trends that on rental rates. Just because it can be kind of misleading. Ideas of whether it's going up or down.
Yeah,
I
that's
asked,
more because she gets, she squeezes a lot of blood out of the
All right.
system
Okay.
with that housing needs assessment with what she gets, so.
So just so I'm clear, are we tweaking I along?
I'm circling
Okay.
it for Folio to tell us.
And I think H needs changing.
We have that,
Yep,
Yeah.
there's a couple things.
yeah, so we're okay with G essentially, but we're looking at H and I to change it.
And F will be tweaked to remove.
And
the-
after.
But also H should not be just in a state of emergency. It should just be a routine.
I thought you had imminent threat of an emergency.
And well, I added that, but then later on, I think Folio actually sent us something saying, make that part of the routine, don't wait for an emergency.
Oh, yeah,
some people will
I
forget
wouldn't,
about
because
it.
they could be doing planning, DEM could be doing
Right, and
planning.
it doesn't make sense. Anything you know that
Okay.
you're gonna want an emergency, do it before the.
Good flag.
So we're removing the current 3 triggers at the start of H.
Let's.
Yeah, and there is
let's-
other
let's
language
just-
that
I don't
somebody
want you to
says.
do that work until we talk to the stakeholders
Okay.
and they tell us, because then we're just rewriting
Okay.
everything.
Yeah, because,
Yeah,
'cause-
but I hear what you're saying, let's just
And-
wait for the stakeholders.
Right, and we did get language, so it's there in some email. I
Oh, it
remember.
is?
Yeah,
Correct.
so we just have to
Thank
find,
you. I have not.
I will
thought
find
of
it,
the-
I will find it, I am so behind.
Yes.
you have a really good excuse now.
No, hitting a deer, are you
Yeah.
kidding me?
She's saying she was behind before the deer incident.
Hey,
So the
Really?
deer came right into me, not, I couldn't, it wasn't ahead of me, or I would have
Like
stopped.
into your door.
It just flew right into my door,
Oh, no, that is always,
and I,
there's no chance.
heartbreaking, it allows you
Then you
to
have to
start
look
a
at that little
productive
face.
week.
I wanna know more details later.
Yeah, I don't want to share more details online,
That's-
sorry,
Yes,
Molly.
that's okay.
But you know far too much already.
And we have a half an hour.
Okay, short-term rental safety regulation, section 40, this is on page 45. I think it's worth talking about first before we dive into
Yeah,
just
yeah,
the email that came across. I don't know if you guys spoke with
Oh.
DFS, but my understanding is that
DFS is coming in, Mike.
Division of Fire Safety.
just because, I think the Department of Health pointed us to this, yeah, you guys can see that. This is from Act 181 in 2022, so just a
Yeah.
few years ago, you guys did this.
We did.
Gifted authority to Department of Fire Safety away from Department of Health. There was an interim period in which the Department of Health was regulating or continuing to regulate post Act 181 short-term rentals. But at the point that they passed rules prescribing these standards here in subsection A, at that point, public safety took over. And so if we elect to do what is currently in the bill, and I'll just jump back to what is in the bill, this returns to Title 18, which is our health title, and provides for ruling authority to the Commissioner of Health, extending those food and lodging establishment standards to short-term rentals. What the Department of Health raised is that they're already subject to standards under what we just looked at, under Act 181, granted that rulemaking authority, and I can pull up the codes here just so you can briefly see. We have this residential rental housing health and safety code. So, and I can, I don't know much about this code. I can walk through it if you guys just want to see what kinds of things are in here. It does go to lighting, electricity, sanitation, bathrooms, this sort of
Like
thing.
exits.
But
It does have exits.
but John, does it get inspected before it's allowed to come online?
I don't believe so. I think it's a complaint-driven system.
It is.
Yep, and then at the point that a complaint is made, notice goes out to say you can't rent this to a new tenant until this has been, fixed. And
Is that when a complaint is made or when a complaint is substantiated?
so the complaint would be made and then there's an investigation. And at the point that it's, I guess, been substantiated at that point, you would have.
So also we're hearing from
So we can
Mike,
just
so
see
let's
any-
not
Yeah.
make John answer questions. But
So I guess the question, I guess, for Mike or for you is, A, how does the renter know where to send a complaint? So we already did this. at
So
181.
that's what I wanted to say is if we do what is currently in here, we're basically reversing the decision that was made in 2022. It isn't a total
That's what we-
reversal because this wasn't exactly what was in statute, obviously, before
Right.
then, but it is
right,
shifting back to an authority that
We
you
don't
guys
want-
elected to shift
We
away.
don't wanna do that, but we do, what we shifted was, and what we provided for in hiring 4 more inspectors, was to have statewide inspectors to replace town health officers who didn't wanna do rental inspections because it got too ugly with mental health challenges, interfamily feuding.
in a complaint driven system.
Correct.
Let's see if I can find this.
But this is not complaint.
But this is
Driven.
complaint driven.
This is still complaint driven.
But the
Oh.
challenge that I think we have is, we brought it up to the same, we did level the playing field in Act 181, which
This is, let me scroll up. it'll just set out the statute that I showed you, but this is Act 181.
So I have a bunch of questions on this.
Are they questions for John?
Well,
Or are
my
they questions
question
for
for
Mike?
John is, and I guess it's also for the short-term rental, nonprofit. How do short-term rental owners know they have to comply with this? Who is telling them that they have to comply with this? I understand,
That's not a John question.
right, and then who,
Yeah.
how does a renter know where
Right.
to send?
So we have them coming in, and I think what it sounds like you're leading to is ultimately we could decide we want to make short-term rentals have a, you know, a form that has certain information, including a number to
Right.
make complaints, posted in each short-term rental unit. That would be separate than what is required in rental housing right now, which is lead information, essentially. What is required around the state in rental housing is lead safety information.
Right, absolutely, but we required when we first did our first rental registry, and when we first did our short-term rental work, I believe we required that they post in a short-term rental, which Wendy says is not there. Because remember you said you.
Oh, yeah.
have, and it's not there.
Yeah.
We had required notice to be posted. See, the post,
Yeah, let me-
you said right there.
Oh, go back to Act 181.
Right, it's right there. If a notice is posted in a common area, the notice shall not be removed until
But isn't that if they have a complaint against them?
no. Oh, I don't
think
know,
that this
but
is, but let me jump to,
ask for notice in the unit.
I don't wanna
Notice it.
throw so much up on the screen, but I think that there is. Here's the
Posting.
basic posting of contact information
Okay.
that's under Title 18.
And the contact information from Department of Health and Public Safety Division of Fire Safety.
Which
Yeah,
needs to
so-
change now because
So now we have the right stakeholders coming in to say, how is this happening or not happening?
right,
And remember, the short-term rental lines, they don't represent everybody, they are member driven, so telling them doesn't guarantee that everybody's getting this information, so fire safety would need to account for if they're looking for this, or if people know that they're supposed to post this.
So it sounds for now, like until you guys have testimony to make a decision on that basis, just
Right.
leave these pieces in, but
Yeah.
potentially this is gonna be
Do
altered.
you, I mean, I think that you could. I don't know, I think you could request the platforms that operate in Vermont to send this reminder annually to everyone on their platform. I mean, right now they communicate when there's some rule they don't like that might change in a city or a state, you know, so they have the capability to communicate with everyone using their platform.
Right.
And we could ask them to send a notice annually that is this required of them.
And or send a notice when someone rents one of those units in Vermont.
That it's,
That should you see something that you think is not safe, call this number.
well,
yeah,
the
that's
better
what we had asked to have posted in each
it
unit.
posted in
Right,
the,
but they could put it on the rental requirement.
See, they could,
Yeah, on the there,
I mean,
there's a lot.
Airbnb could do that, period,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Like they could just say, you're in this state,
Yes,
this is how you make a complaint.
yes,
Is that what you're saying?
yes,
Yeah.
but included in the information that they send to folks who are about to rent property,
Mhm.
who are renting property. There's a lot of information that they send.
I know, that's the only, like, that might be a bigger discussion that we could get to, but
we can chat about with the
Yeah.
short term.
Yeah,
like,
you
we
can
can have
have
that
a very
conversation this-
small statement,
Right.
just saying, if you have any problems.
right,
You know, state of Vermont has jurisdiction, call this number.
yes.
Right, so those are some of the questions.
And then you
Yeah.
know that it gets
I mean,
to the
it could just, we
person.
could say, like their tax code or something, it could be built into the listing. It might not be like, hi, welcome to this house, by the way, like PS, here's this long phone number. It could be built
Well-
into each listing when you're looking at all of the
It
information.
could, but the purpose of this is to get to the person who's actually in the
And
unit.
who's renting?
And the only way that I can see direct online to the person would be in that rental agreement. Or in the notices. I mean, there's things that they
The
get.
rental agreement is separate than the message they get to tell them like how to get into
Sure,
unit.
sure,
I'm just
but-
not sure what you're talking about.
They send a lot of information to the person who's going to be renting the unit.
Mhm.
So one piece of that information could
Yeah.
be,
Right.
if there's anything that, safety concern,
Mhm.
call.
Yeah, so we're working on that general idea. We need to do something by Friday, so I just wanna, that's my only caution is like,
Okay,
what do we know we have control over that we can tell people to do?
so do we want to do this and strip out current sections 40 and 41, which are,
Not yet.
Okay, so we're leaving
Oh,
that
I
in.
see what you mean, that, I would leave them in until we know what we're replacing.
Definitive.
We don't have to do another draft before we talk to them tomorrow.
sure,
And, and I just wanna revisit, just briefly, we decided to not license them,
that's fair.
but to do this because, and, John, if you could just summarize why licensing was a step. I mean, licensing wouldn't have necessarily gotten everything we wanted, as I recall.
Yeah, it provided for the ability of revocation, obviously, upon hearings. I think it just imposed additional burdens, and then there was some question around the 3-unit threshold. I don't know the definitive reasons why the committee as a whole did not want licensure, but I just know that was pretty uniform that people did not.
So the big addition, I mean, what we're trying to do is, not be too. We're trying to protect the public, that's what we're always trying to do, but we're also not wanting to put as big a burden as licensure is perhaps. And I guess I don't fully understand the difference between, but maybe we can talk about that offline.
Sure,
Mhm.
and I think,
Because
I think the Department of Fire Safety testimony is gonna be very helpful, because part of the context that
Yes.
was missing just from me, was that
Yeah.
there is an existing
Right,
regulatory regime that's covering a lot of
Right.
what you guys are hoping to tackle here. Whether that meets the standards that you have is a question that will be resolved.
yeah, we can't ask John questions that are not his to answer, if it's up to us.
we can, but we won't get answers.
Well, I don't want us to do that, when we have more.
I've got lots of, I don't know,
So I do wanna get through the rest of the
Sure.
15 minutes and have 5 minutes to
Yep.
talk.
So let's jump to,
And you might have a copy, but let's jump.
Me too.
section 42. This is on page 47.
Mhm.
Flood risk disclosure. There have been no real concerns in these sections, so this is relatively quick. But section 42 is the flood risk disclosure section that's specific to conveyance of real estate. We simplified this just to be about requirement under federal law to obtain and maintain flood insurance on the property. You can see the ability to enforce compliance under subsection C. Buyer who fails to receive the information required to be disclosed may bring an action to recover from the seller the amount of private damages, the reasonable attorney's fees, and seek punitive damages. Section 43, this is specific to residential rental agreements. So this is a much simpler process. This is to provide a separate written document setting out whether the premises is located in that 100-year floodplain. And then sections 44 and 45 are specific to mobile home lot leases. Nothing particularly complicated here, but I can pause if there are questions. Again, there's a requirement that it be provided in a clear and conspicuous manner in a separate written document. And again, it's the 100-year floodplain.
I think it looks very elegant.
This is one of the first things I looked at when I took this job. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna define things. And
You looked at this language or you're?
so this
reading
this was, I think, the first thing that I drafted when I
Oh,
got
okay.
here.
Not that he looked at with his own.
Okay, I was,
Agreement.
No, I don't. I'm not worried if I get flooded. No. I'm on the 3rd floor.
this was something requested post flood by
Yes,
committee jurisdiction.
yes.
Okay, mobile homes.
Yeah. So the mobile home section has been fairly simplified. We stripped out kind of what was the biggest innovative piece of this section, which was to amend the definition of mobile home parks. We received comments from DHCD just to say that there could be unintended consequences of expanding the definition in the way it's proposed, and that it might be simpler just to modify it. The animating concern for why there had been a request to change the definition was that certain funding streams or support hinged on communities falling within the definition of mobile home park, and that it might be simpler just to have those agencies modify their funding or support rather than modifying the definition of mobile home park.
Which makes a lot of sense.
So the first piece We have, this is section 46, it runs down to page 50. This is administrative tweaks that mirrors the language you saw above, in those first housing program sections. Appropriations to administer the program and sub-granting to state agencies, political subdivisions. And then we have a set of appropriations. So this is for the MIR program, section 47.
So my question here, and it's for Wendy and sort of everybody, but do we want to just say $2 million for both programs because they might need less money for infrastructure and more money for
So
home repair awards or?
that's specifically what I was going to call out too, is that the 1 million for each is just a placeholder. It doesn't reflect the definitive judgment that that's what's required for each
We have
program.
4 million for. We have 4 million on page 50.
Well, that's existing from ARPA, so that's
Right.
not changing any.
Do we know how much of that has been, when did we allocate that?
I want to get to the language, that's not a John question, so you can ask for a witness or talk to.
And that would have been 2022. So section 47 is, I agree, that you could do in the access of knowledge as to how much is required for each program, if it's equivalent or not, you could do a general 2 million and say for these particular programs. If you wanted to be prescriptive as to how much for each, you would need more information about those program needs.
Because DHCD
Goes to the same
oversees
place.
Goes to the same place.
Mhm.
This was just to ensure, so I think that 719 had a $2 million appropriation for the MIRROR program, but it didn't spell out the particular programs to go to. The difference from 719 and this is that this spells out the particular programs, but then just, just has the 1 million for each. So I'm happy to make that change if that's what.
Wendy,
To have
2
2 million
million
go
and
to both.
with both
Or-
programs spelled out.
But they're both administered by DHCD.
Right,
And Arthur and Sean, so. it's-
right,
they-
that should be fine.
And that makes it a
Yeah,
little more flexible.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know that infrastructure is flat million, like they're probably gonna get one or
Right.
two of those out and then. Okay.
right, they're both very useful, good
Yes,
programs.
we love.
On
not the-
page 51, section 48, mobile home park infrastructure needs assessment. We haven't really talked too much about this, but this is just asking DHCD to provide a report on near and long-term infrastructure needs of each mobile home park in the state. And recommending plans to address those needs. There's again, through a placeholder figure here that I've just drawn from similar style bills in the past, 50,000 appropriated to DHCD to carry out this report. I'm not sure what
I don't know
DHCD
what
would
50,000
require if it's,
Yeah,
there's a bunch of parks in the state. This might be a
That gets
labor intensive
tested.
process. So
They're.
yeah, on this one, I worry about them being diverted from, fixing what needs to be fixed.
I agree
With
I
this.
agree. Like they,
But I think having an overall estimation of the need would be very helpful.
the thing is, I don't know what happened with Arthur, but I think that's what Arthur tried to, I think that's his whole job, is like making sure that we have some sense of the need around the state. I just
Right.
don't know what
But
the
this
50,000
is
would
just
do.
with state-owned parks. Is this with just?
It says
state-owned
each-
parks?
No, this is
No,
just
this is all of the
all
mobile,
mobile home
all
parks.
the mobile homes.
So I think we can strike that.
I'd like to just hear from somebody before we strike.
Can we
Let's
get
ask Arthur
Hamlin
first.
for 50?
Sure, whenever
Let's
that
Arthur
Let's take,
like,
take 15 minutes to talk because, we need to.
Let's just send Arthur this language
Yeah.
and see
Yeah,
what his thoughts are.
Can you send Arthur Hamlin section 48 of S311 and ask him if he needs to come in to explain whether or not.
Actually, he's done all the sections.
You know,
Okay.
just,
Hopefully
I
he's
look at
following.
the age restricted housing stuff, it's just always in the back of my mind, is that discriminatory?
I'd like to get to that, but
What?
I just wanna, let's get,
Right.
can we just get through 48 and
Right.
49?
So 49, mobile home technical assistance appropriation. This is again, a placeholder figure. I think that Senator Harrison had wanted to know what CDOEO regularly requires for these programs. This may be
right, and
maybe a
I've,
large or a small sum.
it's a large sum, but,
The million,
they do great work, and
It-
everyone agreed
Yeah.
that they need more money to do.
and they're the
this work.
only ones,
Yeah.
I mean, they're
Yes.
the primary ones.
No, they're
doing it.
really good, and they do it all over the state.
They have been incredible resources
Yes.
for any of us who have worked with them to help set up mobile home park associations.
Yeah, they're
you know, whatever.
wonderful.
Yeah,
And the only question I would have, we don't have to, I mean,
Mhm.
someone else can ask this question down the line, is,
Yeah.
just do they have the capacity or can they have the capacity?
I think I heard them say, yeah, but
But
I
I
sent
would-
us
I would,
reports
if
about one.
they say they can do it,
Yeah.
I
I think, I just wanna flag, I think it's worded strangely, because it says from the general fund to CBOB, oh no, okay, maybe I'm wrong.
Making sure.
To the Office of Economic Opportunity within the Department of Children and Families to sub-grant to CBOEO for the mobile home program.
Yeah, so,
That's fair.
yeah,
I
it's oddly worded.
Yeah.
My understanding is that we don't directly appropriate to these other entities, so that it has to pass through some state entity, which is
Mhm,
what this does.
mhm.
I'm happy to look more. This is the specific path that I have seen for Fund Region
Right.
CBOEO in the past, but there may be other paths.
Magali, can you email section 49 to Sandrine Kabui and just say, could you spend this money? I mean, really, if that's what you're asking, I think the answer will be yes, but like, can you send us your latest, because they've sent us budget requests for about this much, or more.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
we have those in our files from last
So
year.
I think she also needs, I mean, I think she talked about hirings, an
Yeah.
additional person.
So if she could send the latest of their financial request, it'd show her that section.
Is Ann not with us today?
She had an emergency meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she was here until
It's not a personal emergency.
No, I'm sorry, yes, there's all
Yeah,
that.
she's here.
I think we can imagine.
No animals were involved.
Okay, so I'd love to get to the age restricted housing,
Yeah.
and I'd love to zoom back before we go into
And
the,
this is making me
Wording.
think of it.
here is the point of what I'm trying to accomplish here. And it's kind of the opposite of what's written here. That's not a job,
Okay.
probably flagged it. But for me, I'm not talking about subsidized age restricted housing.
Okay.
I'm talking about privately held senior housing. And if we could say age restricted, I'm not sure. But these are not long-term care facilities, which are regulated because they accept Medicaid. These are not our Cathedral Squares. These are privately invested in senior housing facilities that are becoming hedge fund, speculative properties. People are starting to lose track of who owns them, if they are for sale, what rent increases are occurring. So I have talked to the Association of Care Facilities to help us with the language here, but what I'm hearing, and I'll tell you, for me, it's specific to Chittenden County, because I'm not going to say this, but it's Harbor View, it's Falcon Manor, it's places that have
It's Mellishwood
Yeah.
and Woodstock.
yeah, it's changed hands a
We
lot.
just, no, we
Oh,
just had it sold for the first time
okay,
from a private owner who managed
yeah.
an affordable income
Mm-hmm, right,
community for elders. And you have to be 55 or above.
yeah,
And they were very worried about who was gonna buy it, and
Right.
luckily Twin Pines, our affordable housing
yes.
partner, bought it.
So, and speaking of which, Mora has language on making sure the right of first refusal is meaningful and gives them the time they need, and it's more like, please let us know when you have the intent to sell, and then the clock starts ticking and it's a little
So-
longer.
Yeah, we
but
were
I-
very lucky
yeah.
in Woodstock, so.
This is oversight of specific privately held senior facilities that I'm getting worried about have rent increases and change hands without the state knowing. So this somewhat mirrors our mobile home park provision so that we just know. But I think the community knows what I'm trying to do and doesn't disagree. And,
Who's the board here?
This is the HCB, so this is something I definitely want to talk about as the
Yeah.
relevant entity, but just to confirm a couple of pieces here.
yeah, Maura will
Okay.
comment on that. Go ahead. Yeah.
Content of what senior housing is, and senior housing can mean a bunch of different things. Do we have? I mean, maybe I just need to tune into DHFA testimony to hear what
Yeah.
she said, but a bunch of things can fall in this bucket, and I want to make sure that I have the right concept here. I've used age restricted because that's,
That's a federal
relatively clear, yeah.
definition. Yes.
but
So
We're
we're
not
looking the
talking
word
about-
subsidized
Okay.
for sure, because then it says for sale by a private owner, which usually isn't the same thing. And Maura will help us with wording. She doesn't believe the HCB is the right entity. And, the folks who represent these groups will also help us with the wording, because what they don't want to do is include the highly regulated skilled nursing facilities, and I don't want
Mhm.
to either.
Yep.
Thanks for coming. Back.
We're so glad. I was worried. I arrived and you weren't here.
Yeah,
I got
because I just
the whole
know people are
property
crazy.
tax
Okay.
installed.
You weren't gonna be
I-
brilliant
I-
today.
Oh, yeah.
You're left
I've seen situations where, folks
down.
have long-term contracts and they,
Some of
the residents, buy into a long-term contract and then there's actually fraud when the building is sold. Is
Okay.
that the kind of thing that you're talking about? Because that could be just devastating.
I'm trying to get at those situations.
Okay, so I can help you.
That we have a pause when someone goes to sell it and all these folks are in limbo.
Right, yes,
And we,
there's like upstream,
Yeah,
there's
it's also
issues
like
too.
100.
Yeah, so,
I bet.
And are we changing the trigger? So I shifted this to a more traditional right of first refusal.
Mhm.
If the housing is being offered for sale, it also has to be offered to the board. Are we now shifting that to other language about intent to?
we might be, Maura will, Maura, I hope you're listening. She had thoughts on how to make the functional provision and then it was included. What red increase triggers things because I didn't know what the mobile home community, what percent triggers.
So this, I think, follows the mobile home statute pretty directly.
Okay.
I can confirm if there's any sort of threshold that dropped out.
Okay,
But this tracks it pretty directly, and the above provision, section 50 tracks an old railroad right of way, Vermont right of first refusal.
Okay.
But
fair.
yeah, this one
Yeah.
tracks the mobile home statute.
Okay, I'll ask Arthur Hamel about to remind me, because Arthur really takes ownership of when there is a rent increase, telling us when it's a big one. So I guess we wanna make sure we're
He
clear.
communicates with every one of us. It's actually incredible.
So I wanna see if they will do the same thing for senior housing. My only other comments are I would call the two informal studies reports, so that it
Sure.
doesn't look
Yep,
like we
yep.
have 3 studies in our.
The one thing I did want to note on section 51,
Semantics.
Yeah, well, semantics that are important to everyone else.
I can also reorder that to say reports and studies, but stations.
Thank you.
But
Yeah.
section 51,
Mhm.
currently just because we had the right of first refusal associated with VHCB, this section is situated in the VHCB area. We
Okay.
need to move that.
Okay,
So I'll try to figure out where a more appropriate place would be.
we could wait till we hear from Maura, if
Sure.
you'd like.
And is that tomorrow or when is?
Yes.
That's Mark.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow,
Okay.
tomorrow.
Okay, that gets us through the bulk of things, but we might wanna look at the studies. We do have 3 minutes and I just wanna,
so land bank, is that a study or?
It's a report. The only study is the landlord tenant law under current level.
and that's 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate, legal aid, landlords association, DHCD, judiciary. That's 10 members.
That's a lot of members.
It is big.
The basic needs budget, I have to say, was a great cat 5. Was great, so productive.
This has a long way to go. I'm sure the general committee in the House will look at it. I'm sure. I think the reason for 3 of each is because there's a lot of committees that have to weigh in on eviction. It's not just one in these jurisdictions.
All right, it was judiciary.
Judiciary and health and welfare is stuff like that.
Help, yes, health and welfare.
That
would be
gets us
great.
through the bill, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant job. We have some changes, and I want to say this for the committee and for Ledge Council. We will be, so what tomorrow is a big working day on this bill, hearing from stakeholders. Any final language changes that you want to put on the table or get a witness in for, we should try to do tomorrow. Thursday, we lose, because we have pre-scheduled testimony on another bill, and we have our 10:30 joint assembly. Friday is a big day. Prepare to be here after the floor if we, for some reason, don't finish. If we get Ledge Council last minute changes, prepare to come back after the floor.
Sorry, what time would that be?
That would be, the floor is 11:30 to noon. So it would be the lunch hour.
Okay.
And that would, I mean, I'm sorry in advance, but you know, that would be in case there's some changes you all needed to make that
Sure.
we needed to see before we voted on
So
it.
Friday is the definitive day. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I have,
Definitive day.
data privacy of one,
Right.
one on Friday.
And so, and I wish I could magically produce another hour out of thin air, but 8 to 9 AM is our scheduled time with Ledge Council to look at the little nitpicky changes. I promise you, I work to just manage the intent of what we've heard and put something on the table so that Ledge Council can advance their work. So Friday, we have that 8 to 9 meeting, and then John and Ellen have an hour off to make those final tweaks. So please, if you have some change you want, by 8 AM on Friday, we need to look at it, and then we'd be looking at final tweaks that we can't live with it.
And hopefully that is by tomorrow. I mean, to the extent that we
Exactly,
control all
yes.
these things.
Yeah. Yeah,
And then Friday would just be sort of like, oh, this happened to come up.
right, or like, we talked about this language, this is what you wanted,
Yep,
kind of
yep.
thing. Tomorrow, we do have Charlie Baker, maybe for less than an hour now, because we've added other witnesses.
He would still be available for an hour.
Great, Macaulay's Works of Magic, everyone we've talked about today as witnesses is coming in probably tomorrow. Or we need to talk to them about that if committee. Tomorrow, I think the biggest decision on the table is if we are putting more meat on the bones of the guidance to the process that creates the tiered land use maps. So come in having meditated on the Act 250 pieces of the bill. If you need any final witnesses for that tomorrow,